And let us continue in that prayerful mode, in the silence, where we can come and commune with our indwelling Lord. I invite you to close your eyes, relax back into your seats, breathe deeply, knowing that you are inhaling the very Spirit, the Spirit of God. And allow my words to enter into your conscious mind as though you were speaking them for yourself. In my pursuit of coming into a closer relationship with the Lord of my being, I let go of my outer concerns and cares. For this is the time to gently move away from them and walk into a greater awareness of my oneness with God. And so I gently move into the sacred space, that space that is always with me. It is deep within me. And dear Lord, I know that you are always present, always with me to guide me through your wisdom. All knowledge is yours, and I tap into that knowledge. All power is yours. And I know the power I need is available to me. For I know I am one with you. You and I are one. And so I rest as I allow the peace, the love, the truth to fill my heart. Each breath I take brings to me a greater sense of peace and a greater sense of joy. I am safe. And as I rest, I sense the divine presence within me. Life is precious. It's to be lived fully, freely. And so I fill my body with a sense of joy and peace and love and truth. And I know, God, that you are always with me and all is well. You are my strength. You are my knowledge. You are my creator. And wisdom flows forth from you. Life is precious as I see things in a new way. been filled with your love, your peace. I know I am able to go forth this week, meet whatever comes, and see them as blessings and greater opportunity for me to express more of my divine self. For you and I are one, moving forward. Embracing life and expressing goodness. And for this time that we can spend together, I give thanks, knowing that you go with me as I step forward into life. And so I release this prayer now into the name and nature of the living, loving Christ. Amen. We're off to a good start. And I know your picnic's going to turn out just perfect. Indoors or outdoors. Have you ever been caught, or have you been between a rock and a hard spot? Well, once there was a creative man who took one of those situations and turned it around. This creative man took the rock or something hard and turned it into something that was endearing and profitable. It was in 1975, and a lot of his friends were talking about their pets, their cats, their dogs, their whatevers. And he thought, a pet would be nice. However, they're expensive. All the food and the vet bills, and they can be messy. And you got to get somebody to take care of them when you're gone. And so he thought of for a while, thinking that there was a better way. So in April of 1975, he came up with the ideal pet. It caught on fast. Gary Dahl made a quick million by selling a pet carrying cage and a training manual for the pet rock. Some of you may remember those days. It was a man who turned an irritation into a creative solution. And it's kind of hard to find that original pet nowadays because there's so many copycats available. Other creative people have taken situations, something that's hard or potentially dangerous, and transformed it in such a way, turned it around into making it something beautiful. So I want to talk a little bit about creativity in a few minutes. But before I do, I want to ask, how many remember as children playing button, button, who's got the button? Remember? As a kid, you know what I did. And then, no showing of hands, but as adults, how many have played button, button, somebody's pushing my button? It happens. It happens. When someone or something can trigger our reaction, we think it's all about them. In reality, it's more about us. A button, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, a button is a sore point. It's a point of vulnerability that when pushed triggers a response. Kind of like that knee-jerk reaction. There's a reaction that comes. And in reality, those buttons that we have that get pushed can be from our past. And they will bother us in the future unless we take care of them. Unless we begin to see things differently. See it more as an opportunity rather than as a challenge. There was a newlywed couple, and after they returned from their honeymoon, the wife prepared a beautiful continental breakfast for her husband. And he sat down and he ate it and he said, well, this isn't like what my mom made. The second morning, she made a really beautiful breakfast, expanded with eggs and bacon and homemade muffins and on and on. He sat down, he said, "This isn't like what my mom made." So she did that, kept expanding in her culinary talents for a couple more days, and finally after a week she thought, So she gave him a breakfast where the eggs were as rubbery as they could hit the road and keep going. Toast was so burned you couldn't recognize it. The coffee was so strong it would either, or both, curl or straighten your hair. And she gave it to him, the bacon was incinerated, so she gave it to him and he said, "Now that's the kind of breakfast my mom used to make." So he was complimenting her really, but she wasn't seeing it that way. So we want to be able to see things differently. Abe Lincoln was a man of great character, and he used stories to make points. And he was asked once why he didn't replace a certain cabinet member who constantly opposed him on every move he made. So his response was a story that years ago he had been walking down a road and he saw a farmer out in the field with an old horse. I don't know if the farmer was old, but the horse was very old. And as Abe was walking along talking to him, he saw this big old horsefly on the back of that horse, and Abe was about to smack it. And the farmer said, "Don't you do that. If it weren't for that fly, this horse wouldn't keep moving." So what Abraham Lincoln was saying is that difficult people that he had had to deal with were providing him with the challenge to dig a little bit deeper into himself and to come to greater awareness. And so we have that opportunity as well. Abraham Lincoln was able to accomplish great things, not in spite of, but because of the challenges that he faced. So if we can look at a situation and say, "This has come to bless me," even though it doesn't look like that in the beginning, we can have a similar experience and learn about the depth of our own character. For what we see out there is a portion of what is in here. Hopefully, after years in unity, those portions in here that trigger those responses are smaller and smaller. For life is like a mirror, and we can't get rid of the uncomfortable images in the mirror until we make some changes. And Jesus taught us, "Agree with thine adversary quickly." And what that means is come to peace with your enemy. Doesn't mean your enemy is right. You just come to peace with the situation. One of his major teachings was about getting along with people that you don't care for. Love your enemies. Love the ones who or pray for those who persecute you. He taught us that so that we wouldn't become doormats or victims. He didn't mean for us to continue to suffer. He said, "My mission in life is to come that you might have life more abundant." And abundant means not an abundance of material things, but abundance in the richness of life. I was thinking the other day about, those commercials that this costs so much, this costs so much, but this experience is priceless. Think of the priceless experiences you've had. A sunset can do it. Just a beautiful day, or even for some, rain can be a beautiful experience. And some of these experiences can be priceless. I know my plants are saying, "Yay," when it rains. So we want to be mindful that we're to embrace and enjoy life to the fullest, but not at anybody else's expense. He was aware that there would be challenges in our life, that we would have to face hard times, and that there would be people who would push our buttons. And the old way of dealing with things was to react. Remember, the old scripture says, "An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." And some people forget that's the old way. Jesus brought us a new way. Love your enemies. He said, "Be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world." And you can too by changing how we react to certain situations. Christ had a new vision for us, and one we should adopt. One in which we are free from bondage of the past, the garbage of the past, the baggage of the past and the buttons. We're not to let these things rule our lives. We're to work with the adversary instead of working against him or her. Work with them in a way, okay, this has come into my life to teach me something. What is the value that I can glean from this situation? I want to look again, and I want to see that the antagonist has become the motivator to get me off my duff, up and moving. Whatever it might be, the antagonist can become the motivator. We may not have paid attention to the first angelic message that came. So the antagonist comes. Have you ever had that? You get some divine inspiration and you think, wow, but you don't act on it because it was just a fleeting thought. And so later you get, boom, and it's like, oh, now I see why I had that earlier thought. I wish I had paid attention, then it would have cost me less. We go through experiences. There's a story about a very successful executive, young executive, who's traveling down a neighborhood in his new Jaguar. He was casually moving on. He was so interested in himself and how good he looked driving that car. He wasn't really being very sensitive to the situation around him. He had seen some kids, but as long as they didn't run out into the street, he was okay with that. So he was driving along, and a brick smashed into the passenger side of his car. He put on the brakes, backed up to where the incident happened, and jumped out of the car, ran over and caught a kid by the collar. And he said, "What have you done? Do you know how much that's going to cost me to fix it? Why are you doing that? What's the purpose behind all this?" And the little boy said apologetically, "Please, mister, I'm so sorry, but I didn't know how else to make you stop. I threw a brick because no one else would stop and help me." And the tears began forming in his eyes. And what he said is, "My brother's wheelchair went off the curb and he fell into the street, and I'm so afraid a car will come along. Would you please help me pick him up? He's too big for me." Well, the young man had a growing lump in his throat as he agreed without speaking, went over, helped pick up the young man, put him in the wheelchair, got him back up, ready to go, took out a clean linen handkerchief and made sure the little cuts and bruises weren't very serious. And then the little brother pushed his big brother on down the road, on down the sidewalk toward home. So the little boy looked back and said, "Thank you, and God bless you for helping me." Too shook up for words, the man simply stood there and watched him walk away. The damage was noticeable, but he didn't have it repaired. He left the dent in the side of the car, and he took the brick, left it on his desk, and that brick and that dent was to remind him to be less self-absorbed, to slow down and see what he could do, how he could help somebody else. In other words, he was to react in a different way. Stop thinking about himself and think about others instead. So God whispers to our souls and speaks to our hearts. And sometimes when we don't pay attention, metaphorically, God sends a brick or somebody who might push our buttons. When we have an unfavorable reaction or response to someone or something, when our buttons have been pushed, there's a great learning opportunity. So we begin to ask ourselves some questions. What is in my consciousness that has drawn this to me? Why do I feel the need to defend myself? It may be time to extract, remove the triggers, those thoughts and patterns. What causes the hot buttons? Is there a pattern that is replaying over and over when I ask the questions? And there are ways that we learn here in Unity how we can learn to deal with that. One, we pray. God, is there something within me that needs to be removed? If so, please help me. Or we can journal. Just start journaling and see what comes up. You can write on the top of the page what needs to be released. write things that don't make sense, pretty soon they'll start making sense, especially if they repeat themselves over and over. And we then can create affirmations. Affirmations that will help us. I remember years ago when I was in my 30s, I started having a lot of allergic reaction. Had moved to Seattle, and I was sneezing, my eyes were itching, and all that stuff. And I thought, I'm one with my environment. I'm one with my environment. And after a period of time, and not much time, that went away. So they're just different affirmations we can use. But we need to get to the core problem first. So how can I use this situation to help me? I want to see things in a new light. I'm a child of God, and this is all of us. You are a child of God. You are a valued individual. You have something special to do, a divine purpose, maybe not discovered yet, but there is something for you to do. So how can I use this challenge in a positive, creative way? And our goal is to come into a closer relationship with God and to express more and more of God in the outer world. And that can be challenging when we have hindrances or buttons that stand in our way. And another person's response doesn't have to be taken as a personal affront. I've had situations where somebody got very upset with me and said something like, "You're just like my mother." And I thought, we've just met. I may be the age of your mother, but other than that, I think you're projecting. I didn't say this, but it helped me internally say it, so I didn't take it personal. I think you're projecting. Anyway, no one can push our buttons unless we give them permission. And it may be time to say, I'm tired of playing this game. Leonardo da Vinci, a story I read about him once, was that he was painting a picture, and he was in like a warehouse, and there were some young boys wanted to watch him, and that was okay with him, and for a while they were interested and right there watching what he was doing, but after a while, you know how little boys can get bored, so they started punching each other, and then they got a little more rambunctious, and they knocked over some things, which distracted Leonardo da Vinci, and he yelled at them, and they quickly ran out as fast as they could. He went back to painting, but he couldn't paint. So he realized what he needed to do, and he went out into the town, and he found those boys, and as he approached, they were like, "Oh, we're sorry, mister, we didn't mean to." He said, "No, I'm sorry. I never should have yelled at you." So he apologized and cleared the air with them, invited them back. When he got back, he was able to continue painting the face of Christ. Sometimes our reactions will separate us from God, but we need to get to that place where we can see more good. And when we see more good, we see more of God. The scriptures say, "Try to stay out of all quarrels and seek to live a clean and holy life. For one who is not holy will not see God, will not see the good. Watch out that no bitterness takes root among you, for as it comes up or springs up, it causes deep trouble, hurting many in their spiritual lives." I saw a saying recently, and you've probably heard it. Mothers can push your buttons because they're the ones who installed them. And some may do it intentionally, and some may do it knowingly out of habit. And it's time for us in situations like that to realize, I'm going to react differently. I'm going to create a new way of being, and I can choose my new reaction. With God, all things are possible. So we seek godly wisdom for a creative response. And I want to thank now Tim and Michelle and Judy and Terry for helping. What?
You're right, Terry. I love it.
Okay. I mean, that was one name I hadn't written down, and I thought, did I forget? That's okay. Okay, I'm not going to react in a negative way to you, Michael. So.
Excellent. See, that was part of the demonstration.
It was. We got it. Now they're going to remember. Reactive. So I want us to look at this. In the past, when someone pushes our buttons, we become reactive. Well, let's look at that word again. And let's see it in a different way. So as you look at the sea, let's take that sea and let it remind us to become calm, to become contemplative, to take the cares and concerns to God, our Creator. So putting the sea first, putting God first, putting our Creator first, what do we have? We want to put the sea first. If we see it that way, it becomes creative. So I want to thank the team who put that together for me. Putting the sea first, putting God first, helps us become creative. And as we become more creative, we see our world differently. And then we can express more our divinity out into that world. So when our buttons are pushed, we can become calm, contemplative, seeking God, and letting all those creative ideas flow. God bless you.